The truth about your relationship is already available to you. You just haven't asked the right questions yet. Not questions you ask her, questions you ask yourself. 5 of them, simple on the surface, devastating in what they reveal once you sit with them honestly. Because here's what nobody tells you about infidelity. It almost never stays completely hidden. It leaves evidence, not always in phones or credit card statements or lipstick on collars, but in the emotional texture of the relationship, in the quality of her presence, in the specific measurable ways that intimacy changes when someone's loyalty has divided. You already have access to all of that evidence. You've been living inside it. These 5 questions help you finally read it. You're living in a fog that your love created. There's a particular kind of suffering that exists at the intersection of suspicion and devotion. And if you're watching this video right now, there's a good chance you know exactly what that intersection feels like. You love her. That love is not in question. But love, particularly deep, invested, long-term love, has a way of making you an unreliable narrator of your own relationship. It makes you generous in your interpretations. It gives her benefit of the doubt that a stranger wouldn't receive. It makes you talk yourself out of the very instincts that are trying to protect you. So you're stuck. You can't trust your suspicion because you're not sure whether it's perception or paranoia. You can't ignore it because it won't go away. You can't confront without evidence, and gathering evidence feels like a violation of the trust you're not even sure is still there. This limbo, this specific nauseating uncertainty, is its own form of relationship damage, separate from whatever may or may not be happening on her side. The 5 questions in this video are designed to cut through that fog. Not by accusing anyone, not by demanding confessions, but by helping you assess calmly and clearly what the actual evidence of your own experience is pointing toward, because you deserve to know. And more than that, you deserve to stop wondering. 1. When did I stop being the first person she tells things to? Ask yourself this question and answer it honestly, not approximately, specifically. Think back. There was a version of your relationship where you were her primary person, where something happened in her day, good, frustrating, funny, frightening, and the first impulse she had was to tell you, not her friend, not her sister, you. That position, being someone's primary emotional recipient, is not a small thing. It's one of the most intimate things in a relationship, and it doesn't disappear accidentally or gradually from inattention. It relocates. When someone stops coming to you first, they are going somewhere else first, and the question worth sitting with is, where and with whom? This is not about jealousy of her friendships. Healthy people share their lives with multiple people. What we're talking about is a specific shift in the center of gravity of her emotional disclosure, a movement of the primary intimacy from your direction to another direction. When did it shift? Can you locate the window? And does that window coincide with any other changes you've noticed in her behavior or availability? The answer to this question alone often tells a cleaner story than weeks of surveillance ever could. 2. Does her account of her time still add up the way it used to? This question requires you to think like a detective for a moment, not to catch her in something, but to honestly assess whether the narrative of her daily life has developed inconsistencies you've been choosing not to examine. Time is one of the most concrete resources there is. It has to go somewhere, and when someone is managing 2 emotional realities simultaneously, the math of their time eventually stops working the way it should. Ask yourself, has she started having gaps in her day that she accounts for loosely, with explanations that are just vague enough not to be directly verifiable, but just specific enough not to invite obvious challenge? Have the explanations for certain evenings or afternoons shifted slightly between the first telling and a later reference? Most people who are hiding something don't tell enormous lies, they tell small ones. Framing adjustments. Slight chronological shifts. The kind of thing that individually sounds like normal human memory imperfection, but collectively forms a pattern that departs from how she used to talk about her time. You've been kind enough to not press these moments. That kindness is a quality in you. But this question asks you to set that kindness aside temporarily and honestly assess what you've been letting pass. Does the story of her life still hold together with the internal consistency it had before? If you're hesitating on that answer, your hesitation is data. 3. Has physical intimacy become either a duty or a performance, and when did that change? This question is the hardest to sit with because it lives in the most vulnerable part of what you share with her, but it's also one of the most honest indicators available because physical intimacy doesn't lie about the emotional state of the relationship underneath it. When 2 people are fully emotionally invested in each other, physical intimacy has a specific quality. It's present. Both people are actually there. There's spontaneity, reciprocity, genuine interest in the other person's experience. It isn't always perfect, but it's alive. When one person's emotional investment has migrated elsewhere, the intimacy changes in ways that are almost impossible to fully conceal. Sometimes it decreases dramatically, frequency drops, initiation disappears, excuses multiply. Sometimes, and this is the version that confuses people most, it becomes more performance-oriented, going through familiar motions with technical competence but emotional absence. You can feel the difference. The question is whether you've been willing to name what you're feeling. Think about when this changed, not whether. When. Pinpoint the window as specifically as you can, because that window, the period when physical intimacy shifted character, is often the same window when everything else began to shift. And that temporal alignment is worth examining with clear eyes. 4. What does her defensiveness tell me when I subtract the charitable interpretation? Here's a question about your own interpretive habits, and it's the one that most directly addresses the way love distorts perception. Think back to the moments when something she said or did bothered you, when something felt off and you tried to gently name it. How did she respond? Now replay those responses without your automatic tendency to assume the most generous possible meaning, without the reflex that says, she's stressed, or she's tired, or I probably did say that wrong. What remains? Because there is a specific kind of defensiveness that belongs to someone who has nothing to hide. It's uncomfortable and slightly frustrated, but it resolves. It moves toward the concern rather than away from it. It provides information that addresses what was raised. And then there is the defensiveness of someone managing a secret. It doesn't move toward the concern, it moves to reframe the concern as your problem. It turns the conversation from what's happening to why are you like this? It produces a specific outcome where you end up apologizing for noticing something rather than receiving any honest response to what you noticed. Have your moments of gentle raising been received as concerns to address or as accusations to deflect and reverse? The difference, stripped of the charitable interpretation you automatically apply to her, tells you something significant about what the defensiveness is actually protecting. 5. If a friend described my relationship to me exactly as it is right now, what would I tell them to do? This is the most important question of the 5, and it's the one that cuts through every distortion that personal proximity creates. Imagine your closest friend, someone you respect and want well for. Now imagine they sat across from you and described in exact detail everything you've been experiencing. The first question, the time gaps, the changed intimacy, the defensive reversals, all of it exactly as it is, described in their relationship rather than yours. What would you say to them? Would you say, I'm sure it's nothing, you're probably overthinking, which is what you've been saying to yourself for weeks or months? Or would you say, that pattern sounds serious, you deserve to know the truth, have an honest conversation, which is what any person with clear eyes would say about someone else's situation? The reason this question is so powerful is that it bypasses the self-protective mechanism that love creates. When we apply it to ourselves, we minimize. When we apply it to someone we love, we see clearly. This question forces you to see your own situation with the same clarity you'd offer your closest friend. And whatever answer you'd give them, give it to yourself with the same care, with the same honesty, with the same conviction that you deserve the same clear-eyed advice you'd extend to anyone else you genuinely cared about. 6. What the pattern of your answers reveals. You've now sat with all 5 questions. Let's talk about what the pattern of your answers actually means, because individual answers can be explained away, but the pattern cannot. If one question raised a concern, it may be nothing. Relationships have seasons. People go through phases of emotional withdrawal that have nothing to do with infidelity. Individual data points don't tell stories. But if multiple questions landed with the same weight, if you found yourself hesitating on more than 2, if the answers pointed in the same direction across different dimensions of the relationship, that consistency is not anxiety. That is your accumulated experience of your own relationship seen clearly for possibly the first time. Patterns tell the truth that individual moments obscure, and the pattern of your honest answers to these 5 questions is one of the most reliable forms of evidence available to you, not because it proves anything legally or absolutely, but because it reflects what you have actually been living inside. 7. The difference between what you fear and what you know. Before we talk about what to do next, something important needs to be distinguished. Fear says something is wrong. It says this loudly, repeatedly, sometimes disproportionately. Fear is not always accurate. It can be triggered by past trauma, by insecurity, by anxiety that has nothing to do with present reality. Fear is important information, but it is not proof. Knowledge is different. Knowledge says, I have consistently observed this. I have noticed this pattern across this time frame. These specific things have changed in ways I cannot explain with innocent interpretations. Knowledge is quieter than fear. It doesn't panic, it simply persists. As you sat with the 5 questions, were your answers coming from fear or from the quieter, more specific, more persistent place of actual accumulated observation? Only you can answer that, and your honest answer to this distinction is as important as any of the 5 questions themselves. If it's fear, what you need is reassurance, and the path there is a gentle, vulnerable conversation about your insecurity. If it's knowledge, what you need is truth, and the path there is a direct, courageous conversation about what you've been observing. Either way, the conversation is the path. The only question is which kind. 8. Why your gut deserves to be taken seriously. Here's something that research in relationship psychology consistently supports, but that almost nobody says out loud to the person inside the relationship. Your intuition about your own relationship is usually right. Not always, not perfectly, not in every detail, but the general sense, the felt knowledge that something has changed, that something is off, that the quality of connection has shifted in a way that can't be explained by stress or tiredness or the ordinary rhythms of long-term partnership, that general sense is usually responding to something real. The people who later say, "I knew, I felt it for months before I found out," are not reporting supernatural perception. They're reporting the normal function of a nervous system that was paying attention even when the conscious mind was busy making charitable interpretations. Your gut is not evidence, but your gut is not nothing either. It deserves to be taken seriously enough to pursue the honest conversation that either confirms it or puts it to rest. 9. The conversation. These questions are preparing you for. Everything in this video has been building toward one thing, giving you enough clarity to have a real conversation, not an accusation, not a confrontation built on surveillance or anger, a genuine, grounded, honest conversation that begins with what you've observed and experienced rather than with what you suspect or fear. It might start like this. "I've been feeling something between us that I can't explain, and I've been trying to talk myself out of for a while. I love you, and I love what we've built, and that's exactly why I can't keep pretending I don't notice what I notice. I need us to be honest with each other about where we actually are." That opening, soft enough to be received, specific enough to be real, creates the only conditions under which honest response is possible. It doesn't accuse, it doesn't demand, it simply refuses to continue in the comfortable silence that has been slowly consuming you. What happens next depends on her, whether she meets your vulnerability with her own, whether she provides explanation that genuinely addresses what you've raised, whether she becomes defensive in the pattern we described in question 4. Her response will tell you more than months of additional observation, because people who are living honestly within a relationship can be vulnerable when their partner is vulnerable. People who are managing something hidden almost always, in some small, almost imperceptible way, manage even this moment. 10. What you owe yourself after this. Before we close, one final thing that matters more than anything else in this video. You are allowed to require the truth from the relationship you've invested yourself in. That is not a demand born of controlling behavior or insecurity. It is the minimum condition for a relationship to be something real rather than something performed. You cannot build a real future on uncertain ground. You cannot give your full self to something you're not sure is fully there. And you cannot keep paying the specific psychological cost of long-term uncertainty about something this foundational without it doing damage to your confidence, your self-perception, your ability to trust. These 5 questions were not designed to make you suspicious. They were designed to give you enough clarity to stop being uncertain, to move you from the fog into either the relief of clarity or the pain of truth, both of which are better than the limbo of not knowing. You deserve to know, whatever it costs in the short run, because the alternative, staying in the fog indefinitely, costs more, slowly, quietly, and with compounding interest. 5 questions, 5 honest conversations with yourself. And whatever they pointed toward, whether toward the relief of "I was overthinking" or toward the harder truth of "I've known for a while and needed permission to act on it," you have something now you didn't have when you started this video. Clarity. Not complete, not perfect, but enough. Enough to stop minimizing what you've observed. Enough to stop apologizing for your own perception. Enough to walk into the conversation your relationship currently needs, with honesty, with care, with the quiet dignity of someone who loves enough to require the truth. That is not weakness. That is one of the most loving things one person can do for a relationship they actually believe in. And it starts with the courage to ask yourself first, and then her. If this video gave you language for something you've been carrying alone, if it named the fog and helped you see the shape of what's inside it, subscribe. Every week on this channel, we have the real conversations about love, trust, betrayal, and the psychology of relationships that most people are too afraid to start out loud. You're not alone in what you're navigating, and you don't have to figure it out without someone speaking honestly into it. You're in the right place.